Am I live? I am live. Well, welcome everybody. Wow, this is the biggest turnout that I could have expected. It's certainly a much bigger turnout than any electroacoustics lecture that I ever went to here at Surrey University. My name's Ciarán Doran. I am a committee member of the Royal Television Society. We call it the Thames Valley Centre, but it's also the Technology Centre for the Royal Television Society. We're now reaching out to the whole of the country with the RTS. And this has only taken about a year in the making, Russell and Rupert. So first off, my thanks to Rupert Flindt and to Russell Mason for making this happen and getting everybody here together. When I first joined the committee over a year ago, one of the things I noticed was that naturally the Royal Television Society talked a lot about pictures. It's about television. What could I bring to the party? Well, I came here to Guildford to Surrey University as a tonmeister first year, somewhere in the 1980s. Let's just say 2024 is a special anniversary year. And I can't quite believe it's been so long. I didn't get to do what these guys have been doing for the last 40 or more years. I went off into the manufacturing side, and it's so wonderful to be able to bring together a group of people here to talk about live music for television, because all of the facets that we don't mostly understand or acknowledge or even know about what's going on when a live music television program is being produced and coming naturally to our screens. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Rupert, who's going to welcome our guests. Let's just say we've got a few years of experience in the room. Thank you very much.
Only a few. Just a few. Look at us. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, and welcome to the university. And particularly thank you to Russell and all the student volunteers who've helped out today and ushered you all around and everything like that. I was asked would I chair this, and I'm not quite sure why I said yes, but it's quite fun now. And they said, do I know anybody in the business who does know stuff about music for television? And luckily, I vaguely know Mike Hatch, who has done a bit of stuff, which we'll come to in a moment, Mike Felton and Tudor Davies, all of whom are that very rare person that gets to sit in the big chair on the music type shows. And any of you who like mixing music and want to do music for broadcast or television, things like that, that chair is the sort of the apex of it and the responsibility. There's a lot of work that goes on beneath that. I just want to generally make an apology that there are no people on this panel who are not white male and old. I do not know a senior music balancer who is female or diverse in any other way whatsoever. Forgive me, I just actually don't, and I think that's a really bad state of affairs. So, unfortunately, it's up to you to become those people in that chair. And you do need, I would say, you can disagree if you like, slightly sharp elbows, or at least you need to be quite driven and to really want to do it, because it's quite a responsibility. I think I'll say that. So, here they are. Thank you all very much. They're all here for free, including those trucks that you've seen and everything.
What?
Given their time, all been very busy, and everything else like that. So honestly, yeah, did you not realise? We'll talk about that later. That's fine. But no, thank you all. And I think a round of applause before we start. Yeah. So the other thing is, I've got you all here. I would like questions, and I don't want to wait till the end and go, tumbleweed, any questions. So if things crop up that people are saying, I'd be really happy if you're either experts or not, never know, to interject and get a bit of a discussion out of this. Because it's a subject that's very close to my heart, because I love music. I love recorded music. I grew up listening to music, consuming it. Live music is a challenge in itself. Putting aside television, live music has the challenges of it being live performed. We're all used to listening to music that has been edited, tuned, mastered, overdubbed, really, really refined. So your reference in your head before they cut to the band on the stage is something that is a completely different journey. With live music, it's not like that. You've got it all happening at the time, stuff that we will hopefully touch on later from people that know about it more than I do. I say I'm mainly radio sound, I'm mainly sound pure. Today is an event about television, so it's slightly different. So one question first, and it's a safe space. Who's ever heard something on telly with live music they thought didn't sound as good as it should? Oh dear. Obviously,
Sorry.
I think,
We all have our off days.
I guess that would be the case because we have a picture in our head, we have a sound in our head and everything else. Who's heard something on television that they thought sounded better than they expected, not in a mediocre way, but in a, this is more exciting? There's fewer hands, sadly. I think there are a bit more of that. But it's a very different thing. And once you add the pictures, once you see the performer, and this might be slightly different in the classical world from the recorded world, from the pop world, I'm not quite sure. It's something about seeing people and seeing them close to and watching them perform is a different emotional connection. And maybe something that I don't always think about if I'm doing sound. So I've done a lot of talking now. Could I quickly ask you to introduce yourselves in terms of how you would describe yourselves now in relation to music, but fairly briefly. So, Mike.
Sure.
You've got mail.
Yeah, that's not me. I'm Mike Hatch. I was a student here in 1981 to 1985. I confess that long ago. And started off as a freelance music engineer. I mean, I wanted to be a performer, got into this, and I've just worked my way up. I started Floating Earth when we were in 1987, and we've diversified from doing CDs, started off doing CDs and location recording, gradually got into more ambitious projects, TV and radio and anything that comes along. So anything that really involves music, we're interested in doing live music. I do a bit of studio work, but mainly location or TV work.
Mike Felton.
Excuse me. Yes, I'm actually retired now. I joined the BBC straight from school. I wasn't quite 18 back in 1962, and I was diverted into radio, which I wasn't all that keen on because I fancied TV really, and it wasn't even mainstream radio. It was external services down at Bush House near the Strand. So I stuck that for a year, and I thought, oh, I need to get over to the exciting new frontiers of television, which was beckoning. So it took another year to get out. So I transferred to television in the Television Centre, 64, and that was amazing because it was still growing. BBC Two was only just about to start. All the studios hadn't even been finished then. I think there were 6 studios at that time. There was 2 more yet to be built. And the training that the BBC provided then, because that was the normal thing then, the BBC trained everybody really. ITV poached later people from the BBC. But in Worcestershire and Wood Norton, they had a fantastic training establishment that you were posted down there for 3 months. So it'd be given your initial training, and then back to the Television Centre, and you started working on crews. A few years later, you were going down to another course, more advanced, and I was working just on, at its height in the Television Centre, there were 40 sound supervisors, 20 crews, and 8 studios working 7 days a week, overnight turnaround, very quick. A studio was a very precious resource and it had to be intensively occupied. So everything was, and all the crafts were present on the site. Over the years, of course, they divested designers, wardrobe, whatever, including cameras and sound. So it's gradually changed to a totally freelance market now. There isn't any sort of anyway. Sorry, I'm rambling. But so I worked right. I became a sound supervisor. Eventually, cut my teeth on things like Cracker Jack which was a kids program in those days. Amazingly, it was like a mini LE program. It had its own band. This was a children's program, live. And you had a band, it was in the theatre, television theatre, had its own band room, and there was musical numbers involving fallback to the artist, PA to the audience. So you cut your teeth on a sort of a children's program, but it had all the elements of big time LE. So by the time you built up your experience, and of course you had management who guided your career and suggested to producers that they may like to try this chap because he's got anyway, I ended up at the right place at the right time when Mark Cooper decided to spin off a show from The Late Show, which was an arts programme, and to have some music on it, and he wanted lots of bands. And so I got called up to the head of sound's office, and he said, I've got this producer chap, Mad, he wants to do a programme with several bands all at the same time in the studio. He said, sounds great, sign me up. So, and that was in 92, and I did 27 years of it up until 2019. And then when COVID came in, the programme was put on hold. So by the time it was over, I handed over to Tudor, who'd been working with me as an assistant for God knows how many long. So Tudor has taken over the baton of Later with Jools now and carries on. But that was my main sort of bread and butter, was doing Later with Jools. But also I was let out to do Glastonbury and various other OBs. And anyway, so my main thing was eventually, they had a television music studio at one stage dedicated in the television centre. Fantastic facility, double-skinned and floating and everything. And we used to do music for dramas and sig tunes. So I was resident in there for quite a long time, and then went back to the studios again. But anyway, sorry, I've taken up too much time. Carry on.
It's a natural segue to Tudor, please. Yes.
Hello, I'm Tudor Davies. So, like the rest of the guys, I'm a sound supervisor is the term, but I also do post-production as well. Music was my first thing. I'm a keyboard player, about 12, 13, playing in bands. Then through bands, I got to go into music studios to record demos and all the rest of it. So at that point, I thought, this is what I want to do. My dad persuaded me not to work in a music studio, but to try and get a job at the BBC, which was a very wise choice because all the studios were closing. So I managed to start at the BBC in the beginning of 91 and gravitated to try and do as much music as I could. And very luckily in 92, later started. And I occasionally, not full time, but worked whenever I could on Jools as a trainee, then as a sound assistant, then as a PA mix, then I was the PA mixer, then I was Mike's assistant from 2003 onwards, and then where we are now, where I'm mixing it. But in a way, because Mike's also mixed the Mercury Music Awards, which I mix now, and also Mike's done Glastonbury, and I do the John Peel stage at Glastonbury, or the Woodsey stage as it's called now. So we've worked together for many years, but there's been a big overlap on what we have done and what I'm doing now. So I have my own studio in North Acton where I do post-production on music programmes. So the ideal thing is to record a concert or whatever it is and bring it back to my place to do the final mix.
Thank you. Which kind of demonstrates a very important part of this whole thing is relationships, and we do bang on about this to you all, but people you know, people you work with, come back, they employ you, and they trust you, and it goes on, which is absolutely lovely. So back to where I was starting in a way, we've got a lot of hands for doesn't sound as good as you'd like, perhaps, at various times when you're watching music on television. What I'd like to try and do at a reasonable speed, because there's a lot to the job, is just go through the processes that are going and the challenges, which is what we're talking about today, about each of those stages in the process. Perhaps to give you some understanding of why, when your band walks on the stage at, say, Glastonbury, why it isn't like absolutely there from the beginning. And I think we all know why, but why it gets better as it goes on or whatever else. But I think, there's a long process involved with doing a live music show. There's a lot of process involved in television all around, but I think it's safe to say planning is where it all begins. And have any of you would like to talk a little bit about the importance of planning and what sort of information you need and what you get in order to start off before you start booking your equipment and turning up?
Of course. I don't want, I mean, the first question I was asked is, are we visitors at this gig or is it our gig? So are we, is this a TV production and basically I'm in charge of the sound of it? Or is this a gig that's happening anyway and we've been invited along as guests? Now, if we're as a guest, we basically have to fit in, do whatever, work around whatever they're doing, try not to get in everyone's way, because we're already an irritant, to be honest. They don't, but if it's our gig, then we can sort of, within reason, do what we like. We can ask the PA to be turned down. We can ask people to do different microphones or all sorts. So that's a very big change of gear. Is it our gig or is it their gig?
I like to know what it's for. The first thing I always say, what is your target audience? What are we trying to achieve at the output stage? Right? How is it being delivered? And what should the sound be for that end use? And so then sort of work it backwards rather than start from the planning. So work out what we're trying to achieve and then look at where we are on the recce or whatever and try and work out what is going to be good for what we're trying to achieve and what is going to be bad for what we're trying to achieve. And then try and come up with a system that gets rid of as much of the bad things and emphasises as many of the good things as possible. And that's a very, very broad range of choices, but it depends on your location from my point of view, because I mainly do location stuff. I don't work in studios very often, and the only studios I work in tend to be audio only. So when we're talking about television, you're out on location, and every location has its challenges. So I think the thing is to first of all understand what you're trying to achieve, and that varies a lot. And in my world, it's mainly classical, a lot of that is in my head. People don't really know much about classical generally. And so if they say, we're going to record some Bach, instantly I know what I want it to sound like. Now, whether or not I can actually get that depends on the situation.
Yeah. So, lovely, thank you. Anything to add, Mike, to that?
Preparation is the key in terms of making sure, because a lot of the aspects to do with music shows is down to just plain logistics, practical things, especially if you're doing multiple bands, because there's so much gear involved. Lots of black boxes to be trundled around on wheels, flight cases. And that all has to be scheduled and sequenced as well, because otherwise it's like a war zone. But hopefully on a sort of a long-running series like later, it was we got it down to a fine art. And sometimes American bands would turn up and they say, wow, it's so calm in here, it's logistics and making sure that you've got everything. As Tudor was saying, you need to find, in terms of bands, what they're going to turn up with in reality, because you might be sent information. Could be out of date if it's via a record company, and they just, here's the input list for this band. It might not be the current one, probably usually isn't. So you try and make sure that you've got the current information, because that is very significant, because you can either have not enough equipment to deal with it or too much, depending on if they're turning up without stuff.
That's really a huge bell to me, that record companies and people promoting artists want to put them on TV. They want them there. They will say anything to get them to that studio point. It'll be, they'll bring a little bit of percussion, or they'll just do that. And then they know that once the juggernaut has started, they can arrive with almost whatever, and we kind of soak it up, and our blood pressures reflect that sometimes.
There is one thing actually I just reminded about, and actually during talking today I haven't mentioned this once, so I think I should mention it, particularly something like Glastonbury. One of our biggest problems for mixing something like Glastonbury is the amount of spill on stage. Now this is something that people, I don't think you can even imagine how loud it can be on there. There are certain famous keyboard, piano players, singers that, I mean, you couldn't stand within 10 metres of their foldback speakers without being utterly deafened. So you've got a drum kit where you're trying to get a hi-hat sound, an overhead sound, and they have a 6-foot tall speaker stack next to them with their own sub-speaker. That's right next to your mics. So that is why when a band comes out, something like Glastonbury, it's not got that crispness of an album recording. Now, of course, there's a lot of factors why, but a huge factor is foldback. This huge level of foldback that's coming out on the floor, and that's all being picked up on all the mics. And if you were ever to hear a clean vocal mic of a lead singer of a rock band, you would not believe the amount of drum kit you're picking up on it, guitars you're picking up on it. Now, if you pick up a drum kit on someone's vocal mic, a snare drum, now that mic is maybe 6 metres ahead of the drum kit, so you've got a timing issue now. So you're fading up a clean snare mic, and you're also fading up this vocal mic that's also got snare on it, but it's 6 metres in front, so there's a delay. So this comb filters on your drum kit. So you fade out the vocal mic, sounds brilliant, this drum kit, God, I'm good at this. And then you fade out the vocal mic, and suddenly the drum kit sounds rubbish, it sounds distant, it sounds thin. This is all down to the levels of foldback on stage. And that is why permanently in our job we're please turn it down, please go onto in-ear monitors, trust us, it'll sound better. But most musicians have in their mind that the louder they are, the louder their amp is, the better they will sound. And so it's a constant battle in order to get that crisp sound that we're after.
And in the festival situation, you have no control.
No, you're a visitor. You're a visitor. So
and it's not only the sort of monitoring, it's the huge side fills as well. I mean, as Tudor said, the level on stage, like at the Pyramid, because you've got these sort of, it's some sort of flexible material it's made out of anyway, but it all rockets around inside there, the sound. So that's why a lot of the sound on the Pyramid stage is fairly ambient, shall we say.
Politely.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Mike, anything?
Just a
question.
Yeah, please.
Are you an advocate of baffles around the drums then?
Yeah, but that's not going to do much, is it?
Well,
I mean,
the older bands have baffles around their drums.
it can really help with like string sections and things like that. It can really help, yeah.
In a dead environment, dead studio, it might, but if it's rocketing around, it just, goes up in the air. A few perspex screens around the front, it may stop the direct route, but it doesn't really help in those situations.
Can I just interject on that topic? I'll be within a sec. If I put a big perspex screen here and carried on talking, you'd hear me. They're lovely, but they are it's almost psychological. They do help a little bit, but just, please jump in if you know.
Well, I sometimes, when we have, I deal more with closed stages and things, not outdoors so much, though I do it occasionally. But, obviously the spill for us is part of the sound. Very often, the stage is not very deep, and so you've got mics for the horns and the percussion's right behind you. You get as much percussion on the horn mic as you can get anywhere else. So, in fact, you could say, well, I don't need to put percussion mics out because I've got tons of it coming in on the horn mics. So, look at the situation, and sometimes it's to your advantage in our world, but I know that's not always.
Because that's an aspect. What is significant when you're doing a band with loud instruments and maybe a string quartet, and from a TV point of view, they plonk the strings right next to the drums.
Yes.
There's only so much you can influence in layout, so you end up just putting DPAs on the strings, obviously.
Yes, I mean, sometimes the layout really screws you over. I mean, I'm doing a job on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, where we're doing an LPO thing, and they've got a big dance thing in the middle of the orchestra, so which means we can't really put any, and it's being filmed, so we can't really put any mics in front of that because it's a big projection thing, so no main mics, everything's got to be sort of separated out. I don't really know how we'll do it, but it'll be one of those things that when we get there, we'll look at it and think, oh, we can put one there, maybe we'll get with that, and hopefully we'll be able to hide enough that we can do it. But I think you have to be flexible and look at what's going on, especially with when there's lots of people on the stage. Look at what's working, and however much you've done the planning, you get on the stage and you think, well, actually, this is not going to work. I need to change this mic. This needs to be a different pattern. That needs to be higher. That needs to be over there. I don't need that. I need that. I drop that. Do that. And as long as you have some kind of plan B, then usually you can make it work.
Well, talking of that, we had a rock band on Jools a few months ago. I'll use just the generic term rock band, and I knew they were going to be phenomenally loud, and they had a string section. So I got together all the tricks of the trade. So we had perspex screens around the drummer. We had the guitar amps all pointing away from the string section. We had baffles around the guitar amps. And every string, every violin, they all had DPA cardioidant mics, which are the best you can get. You can't get sort of tighter sound than that. It's 2 centimetres away from the strings. So I thought, right, we've nailed this. This is going to be fine. And we went to do the rehearsal, and we only have a very quick turnaround. And the strings were utterly unusable. There was more guitars and drums on these string mics than there were strings. And normally by the filtering out stuff and that, you can get something that resembles a string section. But this was utterly unusable.
Don't you think that's a bit unfair on behalf of the bands to come in and expect you to do that when they've done it in the studio?
Yeah,
I mean, I get
exactly,
that.
yes.
I find people rock up now. A lot of composers come along and they give you their MIDI rendition of what they've done, and it's like 4 bass drums, and it's got the Vienna horn section, and you're in Cadogan Hall with the RPO on a Friday morning, and they've had a week to do the samples of the Vienna Phil horns, and we've got like 2 guys who don't really want to be there, can't wait for the gig to be over. And then the composer looks at you and says, why do the horns sound so rubbish? It's a struggle now because the samples are so good, and you really... The art of orchestration, I mean, this is another topic really, but orchestration has gone out the window. People just expect everything to balance in real life, and this, it's not actually
That was one of those moments where you just thought, shit, I'm in real trouble here. This is not going to work. And this was the main band. This was the headline band. And everyone's looking at me going, what are we going to do, Tudor? So, okay, we're going to have to pre-record the strings. Are you sure? That means we're going to have to get them in. We're going to have to pay extra. We're going to have to get them in over their dinner break. Yeah, and I really don't do something like that lightly, but we did. We got them in. They played along with the band, just playing very gently, acoustic guitar. We recorded the string section, and then I put it all in, and it worked brilliantly, and it was all great. But that was one of those moments where as you say, you've got to think on your feet. You've planned, but you need to be ready to throw it all out the window if it's not working.
To a click, presumably.
Yeah.
Surprised I didn't have a track of it already. I mean, most bands now have stems and...
Which is an interesting topic I was going to touch about how much stuff is real and how much is not real when you do real music. But we might come back to that. So you had a question up there a while ago. Forgive me.
I'll actually adjust it for now. And just thinking about the use of backing tracks, like you said.
Yeah.
Are you, as an engineer on any of these gigs, do you prefer that? Because obviously you don't get the spill. Or does it actually...
Oh, it can really help. Yeah, if you've got strings on backing tracks or percussion or all of that, it can be great. But one of the problems with backing tracks is they're always obviously stemmed together. So, and some backing tracks are brilliant. They just work. You put it on 0 and it all works. Others can really be very ropey. And they'll swear to you that they're not ropey, that this works every time and it's brilliant. And you're like, well, hang on, that one bit's way louder than that. And you can't adjust it. But
or the whole stem is so compressed that you can't make it work on a
you
broadcast
can't fit it
environment.
in, yeah, you can't.
I mean, what you need for broadcast, you need a bit of room. If you're going to have stems, you need to be able to put the lead vocal over. And if it's so compressed like a studio thing, it's sometimes very hard to then get this. In order to get the lead or everything else over the top of it, it's almost impossible because the track isn't done in the way that you would do it if you knew it was a broadcast.
Yeah.
So, and then you
'Cause
go,
I
to
guess-
you go to the band's engineer and say, "Oh, can you redo it?" And they say, "No, this is how we want it." You know, but they don't realise that it's different from broadcast.
Yeah, because I think most stems, I think, are just derived by taking the master session, cutting everything you don't want, and we'll make the stems out of that.
But sometimes they still
No.
put it through the master bus compressor,
Yeah,
so you
so-
then get 6 stems
Yeah.
all compressed. It doesn't
Yeah.
really work when you put them together.
So some are good, some are bad, but they can really help you out. If it's like, I mean, another classic stems is a bit of helping on the BV side. So you've got the band, two of the band sing BVs. They're all right, but it's not brilliant. So underneath, you just put that tiny bit of track BVs. You have enough of the live BVs that you notice they're singing, you notice their frailty in a way, because that's what makes it sound live. But the backing track is giving it the power that you're after.
So, yeah, there we are.
Just a question about planning again in terms of output of where the broadcast might be going. Is there any difference between, say, broadcasting on BBC HD versus iPlayer? Because I think I've noticed, I've been on some forums, where people have said, what's happened on iPlayer? You know, is it the compression has absolutely, smashed the sound on it or something, and there's been some issues on it? Is that something you've ever experienced?
Well, we're not given choice. We're not, certainly I've never been asked to deliver different versions for iPlayer. Different, you do one mix and it goes everywhere. The problems where we have got caught out of quite a bit in the early days is 5.1. 5.1 can be leave you quite wide open because of metadata. So if you deliver a 5.1 mix, and it's a proper 5.1, so you might have vocals in the centre and a bit of drum kit and real proper things moved over the place. It gets sent out as 5.1. When it hits your telly decodes it to stereo. So quite often people say to me, "Oh, I don't listen in 5.1," and I say, "Well, do you watch BBC HD?" And they go, "Oh yeah." So you're listening to the 5.1. They go, "Oh no, I'm not." I say, "You are." If you watch.
Because it's only transmitted in 5.1.
It's only transmitted in 5. If a program is made in 5.1, which let's say later Jools it's made in 5.1, it only gets transmitted in 5.1. And what you're listening at home on your stereo telly is the 5.1 decoded down to stereo. Now it's decoded down to stereo by the metadata that is sent in the signal. So if your metadata is wrong or missing, it will have a serious effect on your mix. And in early days of doing Jools in 5.1, we were doing quite, not experimental, but proper, we had like vocals in the centre and this and the other. And also the channel was learning how to do 5.1. And there were quite a few little mistakes where the mixes weren't right.
The main area that you can get caught out is the centre fold down, whether it's -3 or -6, because that would obviously affect the vocal to band mix or where the vocal is.
The different broadcasters have a different spec for that. And
Yeah.
you need, that's what I'm saying, that's part of the planning. You need to check the delivery spec from if it's Sky or if it's ITV or whatever. They're all slightly different.
So there's,
you need to.
we have an expert.
All I would say is for Eurovision, following on from what Tudor said, the Eurovision Song Contest was a 5.1 production because most of Europe, quite a lot of Europe, take it as 5.1. And even into the BBC, we were delivering 5.1. And as Tudor says, we had to make absolutely sure that the metadata was correct so that it would decode correctly. We were also feeding TikTok, which has different amount of compression requirements and different lux levels and all of that. So there has to be a lot of planning as to how that happens, but also to guarantee that you could hear the vocals, because that's the main live element of the Eurovision Song Contest. We did not deliberately put them in the centre speaker. We relied on phantom centre, so all the vocals were in left and right equally, or if they had effects, obviously they would be across the stereo, but the centre channel was used for presenters only and ambience. So to guarantee that when you heard the mix of the music and the dialogue and the singing, that they would all come back through wherever it was in Europe correctly, that we decided to not use the centre channel for the reasons you described about the metadata. Even though we had correct metadata when we were delivering it, you could check it and listen to it. And, as I say, not use the centre channel for vocals, so that we could guarantee that the balance between the music, which was predominantly stereo, would work with the live vocals.
It's a very sensible solution.
Another problem with listening to 5.1, and I mean, sort of going back to your initial thing about, we only send out one mix. is again in your TV, because if you look at the back of your TV, there'll probably be a Dolby license. Now what that means is inside the telly is a chip from Dolby, and this TV manufacturer has paid Dolby 10p for this chip. But when your 5.1 program hits your telly, part of the metadata as well is it gives it the ability to compress it, God forbid. So you've spent hours creating this lovely program, and if the metadata is wrong, or the levels at a center wrong, it might slam into some pretty crude compressor. And so in answer to that, you know, you're not safe, you know, you can send out your 5.1 mix, but it's much better now. It was, but about 5 or 6 years ago, things were a little bit sort of, you weren't quite confident that what you were sending out would actually be what came out someone's telly.
It's called RF.
Is the metadata generated by you and the truck?
Well, that was, yeah, that was a big bone of contention because we thought it was. You see, we always thought it was. So for quite a while, I mean, to be honest, a lot of this, things have moved on in a way, but so we'd set our own metadata. So we'd say, right, our center signal is this, our compression is it, and we're great. It was only when we had a few problems that we'd go back and analyse it. And it turned out that the presentation suites, so the transmission suites that take all the shows and send them out, had a standard metadata, and they stripped ours off. So whatever we did, they just ignored, and which had huge. So since then, we all really stick with this one generic Dolby setting, because you know that that's what's going to be put on in the presentation suite.
I'll just throw my sixpence in again, sorry. Yeah. So for Sky, when Sky decided that they were going to go from the football, it went from mono to stereo, then it went to 5.1, and now it's Dolby Atmos. All the way through the path, what we did is we did tests at the games. We would mix the games normally for a PPM 6 before we were in the world of LUFS. Then we told Sky presentation and the Sky system, because there's a lot of money involved with the people paying for Sky. We would fix the metadata, so it would be a fixed metadata leaving all the trucks that were doing every football game in the UK. It would all work to that same Dolby metadata, which is the same metadata that was being used by the presentation. And that is how how Sky's model works. In other words, everybody that's on the trucks that's delivering into Sky for a football game knows what the metadata authoring will be when it does. Although it is authored in the trucks, but if for whatever reason that got stripped off and replaced somewhere, or even if the BBC were taking that split feed from the trucks, they knew what the metadata was and therefore could reproduce it very accurately.
Would you rather a world where you were delivering in stereo, or so you didn't have to be mixing in a format that not so many people are consuming?
Depends. Are you paying me to do it in 5.1? I'll do it in 5.1. I'll give you an Atmos mix. I'll give you a 5.1 mix. I'll stereo and a mono. Yeah.
Anyone else got to jump in on that?
Well, I mean, personally, I love the fact that we can finally get away from trying to squeeze everything into 2 channels, and we've got some more space. So, but it works more in my world. I'm sure it's easier in classical than it is in your world. But I would prefer to mix in the highest resolution possible and then generate. I mean, the holy grail is to make one mix that works everywhere, because otherwise you're having to do the work, much more work, to create all the different deliverables. I mean, we've already got to deliver, 5 or 6 different things generally. You're doing like a TV version. I mean, I do cinema stuff, and it's, they're all different sort of things. So trying to minimise that, because they're not going to pay you that much extra to do it all. So I think the ideal will be that we do an Atmos that is compatible with every playback system. So the playback system will then decode to the best of its ability what it can present. So you make a really good Atmos mix that you know is going to work in stereo and in 5.1 and in 7.1 and whatever the consumer has, and on the earbuds and on the iPod and whatever. We're not really there yet, because there's a lot of learning curve with that, but I think that's the end goal. If we can get there, it'd be great.
I mean, I think the ability to put the metadata into object-based audio is very growing at the moment, and that's where. But we're all still dependent on a down mix, and we're dependent on a lot of other stages. And then, as you described, we've got different platforms, all of which will mangle what we do in different ways.
And not all the broadcast chains are even 5.1 yet, let alone Atmos. So we're ahead of it in a way. But I think we should aspire to be, going for that kind of world, really.
Yeah, but if you can't quite hear the vocal on something, there's a lot of reasons. It's not just somebody in the truck who's stupid. I promise. Say that one. Any other questions at this point, or shall I plough on? Good, we're happy. So the next, I mean, there's lots of other stages we can go through. The next one I really wanted to touch on is rehearsals, and particularly with the television aspect going on. I think, I mean, I'm a sound person, so when I'm setting up a band sound and everything, I'll, very carefully process through the rhythm section, drums, drum by drum, and all that sort of thing, and listen to it, as it goes, and build my product, perhaps. I am very aware in television it's not always that easy, should we say. So, go on, Mike, you start with, what sort of rehearsal do you get for the typical big, stressy show?
Well, I think the problem is that with in the scanner, they expect it to sound right straight away. I mean, whatever. You're just literally the first time you're hearing all the mics, and the director will say, "Well, I can't hear it." And what you really want to be doing is sorting out the drums or whatever you're doing, sorting out the string section or the woodwind or whatever. And at the same time, they're looking at pictures and they notice if the sound isn't there. I mean, so you need to present something that's workable from almost straight away.
Yeah.
So the problem with that is it forces you to do something a bit safe, generally. So you end up sort of fading all your spots up and say, at least you'll be able to hear everything. And then you listen to it and it's a big mess of all the sound. And gradually over the rehearsal period, you kind of clean it up. But when TV's present, it makes you think you have to think slightly differently. You've got to give them something straight away because they expect it. Because if they haven't got any sound, they haven't got any program.
And we've got camera people in here and people who've looked through cameras. You need to hear a mix, especially if it's a rock type mix, straight away, because you're being told what to cut to, and that's going to be your rehearsal starts at the same time as ours does.
And we might have 6 radio mics, we don't know who's singing what, You don't know it until they start rehearsing.
Yes, as you said, sometimes if time is short, they'll say, well, can we just record the rehearsal anyway? Well, no, because rehearsal is a different thing. As you said, you might be wanting to test the limits of what you can push against something else. So if they're recording it, as you said, you've got to be very cautious. And so you haven't had a proper rehearsal then, because the whole point of the rehearsal would be finding the limits and establishing the parameters that you can work within in that mix.
Also, until you see what kind of pictures they're going for, you don't always know what the sound should be. I mean, you've got the camera guys have got such amazing lenses now. They like zoom in from the back of the Albert Hall. You can see pin sharp, on the stage, and like we're sort of, we've got mics over here somewhere, but somewhere near, and they've got this shot that's here.
Yes.
And so
somebody with the triangle.
You've got to try and do something that works with that picture quite quickly.
The mark tree is the worst thing for that, because it's certain cameras are always drawn to the mark tree. You never hear the
Yes. It's a very pretty percussion instrument that has little hanging bars of different lengths, and it looks wonderful, and it shimmers in the light, and directors are drawn to them like a moth to a flame.
Harps as well.
Yeah, harp as well. They're big and shiny, aren't they?
Big and shiny, and then in the context of a big orchestra, you can hardly hear them in real life.
Yeah.
And they cut to a shot like this, and it's this close, So you have to do something about that.
Topic of rehearsal, I'll go to Tudor on this one, because we've both done the same sort of stages at Glastonbury and things like that. On the average afternoon on Peel Stage or whichever stage you want to be, just describe what you get from the turnover when the last band's finished to hearing the first number.
At the beginning of the whole festival, we'll always sound check at least 1, possibly 2 bands before we go live. Mm-hmm. The thing is now, when we go live, it's fully, we're live on iPlayer, we can be live on Radio 1, we can be live on BBC 2. So once our slot is up, it's normally, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we have to consider that from 2 o'clock till 11 at night, we are live for the rest of the day. So before then, on the Friday at Glastonbury, we will rehearse the first 2 bands. And that's to settle everything in. Mainly drum kits are the biggest work to get the whole thing working, and again dealing with all the amount of spill and everything like that. But as far as the rehearsal you'll get with the band, you won't get any rehearsal with the band. All you will have is a scratch round. So when a band comes on, you've got their list, their channel list, and they will, one of their crew, or maybe one of our crew, if we're all working out of time with each other, which does happen sometimes, they'll just go around, they'll go, right, kick drum, scratch, snare, scratch, guitar left, scratch, da 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 da. And then, I mean, I've had numerous times my friend Chris on stage literally going vocal scratch, scratch as the artists are walking on, as they're literally walking on stage. And that's it, you're off. So, yeah, there's in a festival environment, there's no rehearsal other than really the first two bands that you rehearse when you're not live, and that's when you can experiment. That's when you can, oh, let's try this bus compressor on the drum kit, let's push it. But once you go in for real, you've got to take it a bit
I
easier.
think the festival operation was described great by a famous mixer who's now retired, called Mitty. You know Mitty. He said what we do in festivals is like stunt mixing, like stunt driving, or stunt gymnastics, because it's literally like getting on a rodeo. You know, you're off, you're away, and that's it.
I think my favourite one was we had a band called Doves, and very favourite band of mine, and it was I was doing it on a Calrec desk, and the stage box was plugged in via a Cat 5, and the Cat 5 had got sheared in half, and we were live on BBC Two in 7 minutes' time, and I had the guarantee engineer crimping a new Cat 5 end on there, and I said, "Should I worry yet?" He said, "No." He says, You get the desk ready, although it's not actually working. You imagine it is. Get it working. And literally with about 3 minutes to go, he put this thing in. It all came up, and it went live straight to BBC Two.
We did a gig in Symphony Hall where we'd got mics up in the roof, and we'd had a little stage box up there and dropped the mics down, so they were there, and then there was mics on the stage, and it was all going great. Rehearsals fine. When it came to the show, they faded down the lights, and we'd plugged one of our stage boxes into the light thing, and it all faded. All the roof mics just went quiet. But we only needed the second piece in the concert, so we sent somebody up to the roof, and we hot plugged into some patch lines, and we during the overture, which fortunately was quite long, went up on the roof, hot patched it to the stage box, and we got, of the 10 mics in the roof, I think we got 9 up by the time we got to the piece we needed. But I got a bit of a bollocking for sending people up to the roof and switching the lights on during the concert, but we got there.
Yeah, another case of minimal rehearsal was at, I don't know what year it was, when the BBC sold off the television centre, and Mark Cooper, who was the exec producer on later, he commissioned a concert outside the front of the television centre in the sort of horseshoe car park with Madness, the band Madness. And the title of the programme was It's Madness, which referred to the closing down of the television centre. Anyway, so they set up this big temporary sort of rostrum place and it was terrible weather, I remember, sleet and snow. And it was Conrad's truck we were going to be using at the front, and a proper OB truck as well for the camera side. And the power was supposed to come from one of the power outlets round that area, and the TV truck was up and running, and we were still waiting. And I said, "When are we going to go?" "Oh, it's got a bit of an issue." But anyway, time went on and on and on. Eventually, the band got to the point where they needed to start rehearsing. And we still hadn't got power. So I don't know how we managed to get some sort of sound into the truck for them to start going through running through the numbers that they just wanted to for the rehearsal. Anyway, for some reason, we eventually got the power into the truck, and we got half of one number before the band said, right, that was the end of rehearsal. So I had half a number. Luckily, Conrad was running the multi-track. So I had half a number to set the desk up and get a basic mix going before the concert happened. And luckily it was material, Madness, we were familiar with all the material, and So you knew what. You didn't need any rehearsal of the actual. But if we hadn't managed to get that half a number at the end to get some material on the multitrack, I would have been in the right hot water.
Any questions at this point before I flow on? Yes.
I was just interested, do you have the same lack of rehearsal at Glastonbury for the major acts?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Have they not rehearsed at all?
They can come in, don't they? The first thing in the morning, sometimes they do a line check, don't they, really early. I know we have that on the John Peel stage, the headline act. Their crew will sometimes come in at like 10 in the morning just to get it ready. But it's never a proper, like the band don't come in, but it might be a scratch around. You might be able to at least establish a scratch around. Yeah.
You might get the drum tech playing the drums, the guitar tech playing the guitar or something like that, and it's a sort of...
Half volume.
It's a half-hearted ensemble.
I'm just interested because it shifts across to BBC One for that big moment, and a great deal more pressure's on, and everybody's expecting and knows McCartney or Felton, and expecting that sound right from the beginning, and that's very different to, you know, a B stage with a minor act.
Yeah.
No, it's not much different. I mean, the main thing is just in the morning they do a quick check just to make sure nothing is sort of catastrophically wrong. In fact, he did one. I think the main monitor desk of one of the main bands blew up, and they had to they had to get a cherry picker. They had to put it on a forklift, a spare desk, to come across from another stage and put it up on the pyramid stage with just like an hour to go before the main act. But glory stories of.
But I would say, I mean, a major challenge of live music to television is those headline acts are massively important to the brand and to the event, and yet that sound, that rehearsed sound, it just isn't given the opportunity to.
Well, there's just no time to do. Yeah, there is no schedule part in the schedule to do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you just need to be very quick at
We've laid
doing everything
on,
at the same time.
Yes.
You know.
Rock Festival's obviously one thing.
We've
Mike,
just done the Brits, and you have 3 days of rehearsal.
Yes.
You know, so actually, sometimes there is the rehearsal, and each band gets 2 hours. It's stored. They come and listen to it, we fiddle around with it. You know, get this vocal up, get this down, and because they want it dry, and they don't want it to sound like the O2. And of course, we're in the O2, and you're playing back the vocal, and it's got room on it, and they say, "Can you lose the effect?" Well, no, you're in the O2. So there's always this bit of shock when they get over the shock. And
which brings me to my next topic, which was television and the audience. Now, like we know how recorded music sounds, we know how a rock band should sound, even a rock band playing live sound. By definition, with television, the crowd is half the excitement. Well, it's the full excitement of the experience of the event, and any director worth their salt wants that thing. So, what does that do to what we have to do?
Well, I mean, the whole mix is, literally 3 or 4 dBs move of a fader will completely change the mix if you're in a festival. With that level of spill.
I want more crowd.
Yeah, with that level of spill, you've got to imagine you've got this massive line array system blaring it out. Possibly in a tent like the John Peel tent.
It's not a static thing, though.
No, it's not static.
You ride it
constantly.
You pull the waves of cheering, or if they're joining in, you need to hear them sing.
Generally any TV mixer has a hand on the audience fader all the time. It's not something that you just sort of sit there. It's something you may with your other hand be doing vocals and this, that and the other, but your left hand whatever is constantly, because you don't know whatever point there might be a laugh, there might be this, there might be that, you've got to be there to react to it, but you can't leave it up. I think people don't quite realise, you can't have all your audience mics left up. Your sound will just sound like it's in a barn. So you're literally pulling it back 20 dBs possibly. And then you've got your mix, that's your nice sound, your song, that's where they're performing. And then at the end of the song, you're pushing it all up 15, 20 dBs to get the reaction. So it's very much a managed thing that you're doing all the time. And you get a sixth sense for it as well. You know when, even on live festivals, you know when the crowd are going to cheer, something's happening, you know. The lead singer is put a new guitar on and they'll all cheer, and you just get that sense for it.
But on the Brits, we have something like 32 audience mics, and we have somebody pre-mixing it in a completely separate area. So monitoring it the whole time, working out where the people are swearing, you know, where the crowd's enjoying it, where they're not enjoying it, where you've got clinking, and going through and sort of feeding that in as a pre-mix into what we're doing.
It's good.
Luxury.
Yes, luxury. Well, it is luxury. Yeah, I mean,
Luxury.
but you know that means because it shows. But I agree with you that it needs to be. It's got to be monitored the whole time because it's a very variable thing. And you know, if the room is responding well, then it's going to be great, and it's up and it's screaming, and sometimes it's too loud, and you know, or you need to help it.
With like the development of technology, I guess, and auto mixers getting better, do you think something like crowd noise where it's a bit less like artistic to mix it, and it is just if they're being loud, sort of?
No, I don't. I think it's the most. I think it's the most intuitive thing in a way that you're doing is that moment of. See, another classic is when a song's finished, and everyone's applauding. And you just hear gently the drummer 1, 2, 3, 4. By 4, you've got to be down. If you haven't dipped it by the time that song starts, it will sound like it's in a barn. So that's something AI is not going to be able. So you're sat there, and it may just like doing that, but actually you're going, okay, 1, 2, and you're just slowly bringing it down, so that when the band kick in, you're back down to your music level of audience. So yeah, it's the fun bit, to be honest. Well, there's nothing better than, you know, a brilliant band playing that you're loving, and that you've got in your hand, you know, 20,000 people screaming. I'm not handing that over to AI, no way.
Please, good on you.
2 things. I think you use a lot of samples, don't you, on the Brits for the audience?
Maybe.
That's true, isn't it? Because you can hear it. You can see them not applauding. You can hear the applause into the breaks and things.
Yes.
So that helps this film situation. And with regard to talking about AI to do an audience, I do the Michael McIntyre's Big Show. That's a comedian in front of an audience. It's got music as well, but all the time the comedian is speaking, my right hand, I mean, basically I mix all the show with my left hand, because my right hand's permanently on the audience fader, as Tudor says. I've got to write, if there's a laugh coming, you've got to understand that there's a joke and everything, you've got to push the fader, and as Tudor says, it's 20 dBs, and you've got to pull it straight back out again, otherwise the voice is coloured all the way through. So my right hand is dedicated to all those sort of shows all the time, just dealing with the spill from the audience and making it sound exciting. The more you push that fader, obviously you get more sound from the audience, more excitement from the audience. You pull it back, you get the clean sound off the stage, and it's finding a balance, literally finding a balance in real time, something that AI could never ever do. It's no good, it's just being gated or using a side chain from the comedian that's talking to actually work, to manage the spill on the audience. So.
One little trick that I use, and it's a good one to try, and we've done it for years on Jools, is if there's a band that, you know, the crowd are going mad and the band just kick in and you really naturally, you just can't, it would sound rubbish to just fade it out. But if you don't fade it out, you're going to get this really open band, open drum kit, it'll sound horrible. It's just replace that applause. So you keep the live applause going, but that last few seconds before the band start playing, you pick up a wild track of, you know, in the room, a proper, not something you've got off another show, you know, but one where you've got a clean tail. I mean, our lives revolve around clean audience tails. They're the most valuable thing. We have loads of starts of applause. We always get loads of starts of applause, but it's always the tails that are edited out, and they're the ones we need to replace. So if you're trying to get a nice clean start to a band playing, you can then just put in a clean tail of audience, and it will still sound brilliant. There's all these people cheering and yelling, but as when the band kick in, they'll be all tight. So
doesn't work live.
It doesn't work live, no, but it works in post-production, yeah.
Go on, yeah.
And also, so like when you're doing like some a big show like Glastonbury, would you be looking for those to take these?
Yeah, I do. I make notes. Yeah, I might make notes of. To be honest, Glastonbury you're not in that mode. But certainly on Jools or something else, I'll make a note saying that was a good, clean tail. It's all about the tails, you know. As I said, and you only need one. And that's it. You're sorted for the show now. You can just put that little tail in, and it's brilliant. And I'm sure, as Robert will all probably agree, On live shows, we have also, sometimes if you know going into an act it's just going to be a car crash with the audience, sometimes you play in that applause. So you won't be going for a handful of the live applause. You might do a bit, but then it will be taken over by a played in applause, which will mean the band will start all nice and tight.
Applause without spill, yes. Can I just, I mean, I'm aware we're over time-wise. Are you all happy at the moment if you just rumble on a bit? Anyone who wants to leave, just sneak away if you have anywhere to go. Can you, we're not talking about live now. If we're talking about pre-recorded where you have the ability to refine and package, can you overdo that?
From the artist's point of view, no.
Yeah.
I mean, they ask. I mean, if they know that it's not going live, that you can get a list that's as long as 4 pages of corrections, most of which you probably can't do, but you can try, I suppose.
Okay. Any other views?
I tend to think that what you've done on the night is usually it, really. Fiddling around later might do, doesn't do much to me.
Well,
I'm happy with
we do quite a lot of live concerts where we film the concert, and then when the audience is gone, we then patch a couple of bits that they also film. And that's for things that really are detrimental to it, like singers cracking notes, horns splitting awfully, or somebody dropping something, those kind of things, and we film them and drop them in if it's not live. And I think it's in the artist's interest for it to look good and sound good, and sometimes you, for whatever reason, for nobody's fault, it hasn't worked. Somebody's disrupted, somebody's shouted in the audience or something like that. There's been some kind of event that you can't cover. And we usually have the option of just dropping in a filmed patch when it's not live.
Yeah. So we're repairing as opposed to polishing, perhaps.
Yeah,
Two
so.
different. Jude, have you got any view on that?
Yeah, I mean, it goes from all ranges. You can do a mix and they will just go and say that is absolutely perfect. Thank you very much, it's brilliant. And you're like, well, it just sounds like everything else. And then the other ones where they'll just go, no. This and then bits in the middle. And you sometimes, first of all, you do need to be quite thick-skinned, which is not easy, because at the end of the day, the reason we love doing this job is it's an art. You're doing something, you're making the mix, and so if someone isn't getting on with, if you're just not clicking with them, it's not easy. But also, you sometimes have to think of the bigger picture of, is there another engineer that's trying to get a day's pay out of this? And that is a very regular thing, particularly after COVID. There's a lot of people trying to do whatever they could to get some work. So, you just got to sometimes stand back and see the bigger picture. But also, in post-production, you may also be fixing clicks, feedback howls. Now, a lot of these, clicks particularly, they'll fail the program. If someone in the audience just lets off a popper or something, although it was someone fiddling around with a popper, the tech review people will listen to it and say, there's a click on this program, we reject it. Can't be broadcast. So you have to, a lot of my time is de-clicking, de-popping, taking out feedback howls and things like that. So even if you consider you don't need any post-production on something, there's still a huge element that it might come back to you because it's technically not going to pass the tests that they do. So, yeah.
Any questions on that?
I'll just throw my six-penny in again. Being in the freelance world that I'm in, I don't have the luxury of my own dubbing suite, so I'm always handing over anything that's recorded to a dubbing mixer if there is going to be an edit afterwards. And quite often there isn't the experience that maybe I've had, or maybe they've not been at the venue, and then they can actually destroy some of the work that you've done. So I do the Masked Singer where they do actually sing live in the mask, so I insist that whatever else they do to the show, because quite a lot of it's post-produced in terms of cutting judges' sound in and everything, but they actually leave the music bits alone, because I've spent a lot of care and time, as we all do, in trying to get the music right. I could argue about the levels of how loud the panelists are or whatever, but and now are given all the stems, and they have the ability to remix it. And as Judy was saying, there was an element where the dubbing houses were suddenly taking 2 days to do a dub on a show that I'd done, when in fact they could have done it, I used to do shows, as a tutor would tell you, you don't do it in half a day or whatever the time it takes. But from a commercial point of view, the dubbing houses were saying, oh no, we need to take this apart, we need to rebuild this for commercial reasons, not necessarily for sound reasons.
And going back to talking about the working an audience thing, it's a real skill learning how to make a show sound lively and energetic and all the rest of it. And so that's what we all really work hard on, making it sound like you are in the venue, like you're out there at the festival. And so it's very makes you very despondent if someone goes back to all the original stems and suddenly takes all that out and suddenly goes, what's happened to the mix? It's all so it's something you need to be aware of is not letting keeping a little bit of control so that it's the sound that you wanted to happen.
Questions, yes?
On large events with big production teams and lots of broadcast companies involved, how are you retaining control and amicably making decisions, mixing decisions?
Well, I think on the big shows, everyone stays in their lane, really. You're doing... Because you can't... It's so big that you can't really get involved in other people's work, and you shouldn't do. You need to do your bit, do it right, and then if somebody else messes up down the line, that's their issue. So you're feeding into whoever the next person in the chain is, and if they do it differently, then if that's a production thing, and eventually, hopefully, you all cooperate and get something that everyone agrees is what you're trying to achieve. But I think you can't trample on other people's toes, and not everyone's going to do it in the way that you think you should do it. But the most important thing is to make sure you do your bit to the best of your ability.
I mean, it's a double-edged sword with being a sound engineer, because on one hand, it's one of the great bits of it is generally productions, if they trust you, they just leave you to get on with it, which is wonderful. You sat there, you go, this is how I want it to sound, but then occasionally it suddenly hits you, you think, do you know what, we're doing this as an OB. The production people are sat in some tiny little porter cabin with a speaker that big listening to what I'm doing. No one's checking my work. Now, cameras, they've got teams of people looking at their camera work. Imagine, you've got all the camera people, you've got racks working all of the racks, lighting engineers looking at their pictures, the director, the vision mixer. By the time a cut picture is made and goes out somewhere, I don't know, 10, 15 people have had eyes on it. And yet sometimes on audio production, you're the only one with ears on it. So that's a double-edged sword that you're sort of left to your own devices, and yet sometimes it can be a bit lonely.
But I think that's part of the job, is that they trust you, that they don't know about it, so they just want you to deliver what's correct. And, they're only going to hear from the TV people if the sound isn't working, generally. Yeah. So, usually we're doing our own thing and they trust us. You get booked because they know you're going to deliver whatever's required.
Yeah.
I always feel television sound is like bathroom plumbing, that nobody wants to know anything about it until it stops working in any way or form, in which case suddenly it's, oh my God.
I mean, the thing is, if a mic goes down, it's a disaster, isn't it? If the main mic goes down, but if the camera goes down, they just cut to another camera. They've got loads of cameras, it's fine. So we're immediately in trouble if we lose a main mic. So it's a bit risky sometimes, these big live shows.
Any other questions while we're going? Yes?
One thing we've not mentioned is microphones, and I just wondered, just a couple of lines on microphones, because it seems to me, I started as a sound engineer, but I've been out of that for 20, 30 years, but I still see the same microphones, the SM58, C87. Everything else in sound I don't recognise when I go into a truck, but the microphones have stayed the same. I just wondered, is that just my impression? I've got it all wrong. There's a whole load of new microphones, or is there something odd about microphones that needs to change?
Well, no, there are numerous new microphones all the time coming out, but in terms of those good old standards, the 58 and the 57, U87 or whatever, they just do the job, and people have familiarity with them, and they like using what they know works.
Can I jump in on that for Mike? Sorry, how many mics did you have on that coronation? You've all been in Mike's truck and seen those orchestras playing and the choir singing and everything.
Well, it's a shared operation, but there's about 192 mics altogether.
Yeah. They weren't all SM58.
No. I mean, the thing is, it's horses for courses, and you've got to choose something that is discreet when we're talking about the sort of stage shows and concerts and things. But when the bands come on, because they can have a mic like that, and we would never get away with doing that in an opera. So it's slightly horses for courses. I mean, I use lots of different mics. I try and use something that I want to be able to use the microphones that I like the sound of, but you can't always do that, because if they're too big in the shot, or you have to put them further away, you can't necessarily choose the microphones you want. So the skill set is that you can do something with whatever you can get away with. So, I mean, I did a ring cycle in Leeds where they had everything projected across the front of the stage, so I couldn't put any mics up over the top of the orchestra because of the 3 projectors. So I ended up, my main mics were leaning out of the galleries, the balconies, either side of the theatre, and I had to use hypercardioids pointing straight down, very directional. And it actually sounded great, but you would never start off saying, that's the way I want to do it. But, I found a way that I could get them just out of the shot of the projector and point them there and zoom them in, and it was okay, and I got a good result from it. But you can't always use what you like. I mean, I use ambisonic mics quite a lot for the Atmos stuff. It's very rarely the entire solution, but sometimes it's part of it. I'm always interested to try out new microphones. I think, the technology is moving on, but you're right that the old microphones, it's amazing how long, it's the only thing that doesn't date. Everything else goes out of date and you have to buy new ones, but the microphones last.
But also, the actual choice of microphone is less important than where you put it and where you point it. That is more significant than which mic it is.
Well, with all
it's a bit different.
With all
not in your,
not in my world.
Not in your world,
because depending on the sound of the venue, if you've got a very bright sounding venue, you do not want to use very bright sounding mics because you're going to end up with a very tizzy sound. So somewhere like Symphony Hall, it's got a reflective floor. It's very, very. If you're doing Mozart, it sounds terrible if you use bright mics. But if you're going somewhere like what's the one in Manchester,
Bridgewater.
Bridgewater is a much darker sound, so you can use much brighter microphones because it doesn't ping out so much. So in my world, it very much does make a difference what microphones you use, but we're a long way away from the action in a way.
Yeah, no, I was just making the point that people obsess about technology and equipment. But it's very important positioning.
It is.
The thing I'd say also is down to the practicalities of, certainly in my world, we hire it all in. So it's what they have in stock, and what any hire company will have in stock are all the famous mics that everyone uses. Now, if a company bring out a new vocal mic, and that's quite good, with all best will in the world, the hire company's not going to want me to ask them to go out and buy 20 of these new mics I've heard about. They'll say, well, we've got all these, So there's an element of all the hire companies have all this kit of quite sturdy, reliable, well-tested, good microphones, and therefore we're drawn to that, and it's also what bands expect to see. They'll walk in and go, oh yeah, that's good. I mean, occasionally we sneak in, a new trial mic or something new, but there's a lot of down just the reality of we hire it all in. So,
I think there's a pop culture thing going on as well, that they are self-defining sounds. The sound of a 58 is a rock vocal sound because it is what it was, and it doesn't need to evolve. And we've all tried the Ponce, the DPA vocal mics and things like this, and all sorts of other marvellous microphones. But anybody else? Any other question? Oh, lots. Go on.
So I've got one about 5.1 and Dolby. So with 5.1 and Dolby becoming more common like in broadcasts, is the number of viewers listening in 5.1 and Dolby increasing enough for it to be like more common, or do you think it will be a bit of like a while until it's normalised in households?
Well, a lot of people are listening to Dolby even if they only got stereo, and they don't really realise that they're listening to Dolby because it's being transmitted. And I think that's the aim, isn't it? To get to the stage where we transmit the highest quality and the listener gets whatever is available to them. So if the listener then goes out and buys some surround speakers, suddenly what they were previously hearing, the same stream, enables those and then they work. So I think it is growing. I mean, you know, the number of widescreen TVs in Costco that say Dolby Atmos on is large. So I think it's going that way.
The other thing, when we first started doing later with Jools in 5.1, it wasn't a production request. They didn't turn around and say, oh, we'd love this to be in 5.1 now. It was because they sold the series to America. And America want it all in 5.1. So that's what
the funny thing
got
about
us going.
The amusing aspect was one of the initial meetings with the American people. I said...
You're not doing that story. I'd highly recommend this. Don't go there.
That's not?
No.
Well,
Mike,
no, I said, well, yes, we can deliver 5.0, you see. What? No, we've got to have 5.1. I said, well, you understand that the 0.1 is only a cinema thing, really. It's like because cinema is a calibrated system, and they run out of headroom, you know, for the explosions and the earthquakes and the volcanoes. That's when, you know, so they had to invent this 0.1 to put extra sub-bass, because it only goes up to about 120 bandwidth. Anyway, so I said, Dolby recommend that you don't put anything in there apart from special effects, and the whole mix should exist in the 5 channels. They didn't understand this. Well, you got to have 5.1. That's what the customers are paying for, you know. So anyway, I had heated arguments over transatlantic phone calls with people about this. Anyway, so in the end, we just dribbled something into the 0.1. And,
sorry, I thought it was the Sherman story. Oh, that's another one.
I think we're spared. Anybody else? Any other questions? Oh, loads. Here we are.
Can I ask a question about radio for wireless mics? What proportion of links are digital now versus analog, and pros and cons?
It's pretty much all digital now.
Mainly digital, isn't it?
Yeah. It's digital because of the reduced amount of frequencies available. It's digital because of increased quality. So one thing I have found as a negative is the dynamic range of them is so huge that actually previous working practices can sometimes just not work, or not work as well. Before, with an analog radio mic, there was various compressors and companders inside the thing that actually really helped you out. You know, if you were working on a show and the presenter started clapping, and suddenly you're doing the same thing on a digital radio mic, and it's, I need some extra help here, you know. But yeah, it's pretty much all digital now.
I'm going to have to stop. We've run out of time. I've been given the sign, but thank you all very much for listening and for the questions, and more importantly, thank you to Tudor, Mike and Mike for coming to talk to us all.
I don't know if you've got me on. Have you got me on the mic? Rupert, thank you so much for this. Mike and Tudor, that's absolutely fantastic. There was something I forgot to mention at the beginning. The Royal Television Society is open free to students. Students can join for free. So please do go to the website and sign up. And in the next few weeks, we'll be taking this recording and we'll be putting it onto the Royal Television Society's website. So please do tell anybody else who wasn't able to make it tonight to watch it online. So once again, thank you everybody for joining us this evening, and thank you to our guests on the panel.
And especially for the trucks.